What's good, y'all? Today I have a Viper guide for you guys. This is going to be a bit more of an all-inclusive guide, talking about her general game plan, her philosophy, as well as things like Okizeme Pressure later on in the video. I know it's been about a week since my last video. This will not be the norm. I'm planning on putting out at least 3 videos a week from now on. So please leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. And without further ado, let's get into the guide. So the first thing I want to break down when it comes to Viper is going to be her overall game plan and philosophy as a character. What does she want to do when the announcer says round 1 fight, right? And Viper is a character that many will pin as a rushdown oriented character, and that is true in my opinion. Viper is a character that wants to be in your face. She wants to be plus, she wants to have, solid mix, she wants to have strike throw. She wants all of these things. She doesn't want to be in neutral for too long. She does want to be in your face for sure, right? But the way that she initiates this rushdown is very, very different from pretty much any other character in the game who has this sort of rushdown oriented playstyle. And I'll break down why right now. The main thing that I want to talk about when it comes to why Viper is such a different rushdown character is going to be her drive rush, right? So as you may know, her drive rush is not the best. But there's a specific reason why her drive rush cannot be used to initiate most of the time, and that's the distance traveled in the amount of time that it takes to do something like drive rush jab, right? Let's take Luke, for example, who is on the opposing side here. I will move him forward a tiny bit and then have him jump and drive rush jab. As you can see, that connects. I can probably even do it from a little bit further away. Yeah, pretty crazy how far that connects from, right? But if we do the same exact thing with Viper now, we'll move her a little bit far forward, a little further even, right? As you can see, not even close, right? She does not even come close to reaching Luke here with her drive rush jab. She'll have to do something like drive rush low medium kick, and she doesn't get anything from that range. She doesn't get her crash heavy punch, crash medium punch, pretty much anything there. Now you might be thinking, why can't you just walk forward into the range of your drive rush jab and then just do it, right? Well, you can do that, but there's an issue here. Now, whereas with Luke spacing from around this range, if he does drive rush jab, I'm not likely going to be already pressing any buttons because all of my buttons are going to whiff at this range, right? But if I'm in range of my drive rush jab against Luke, a lot of his buttons will actually connect here, right? Right there, you have stand medium kick. Most of his buttons there will work, besides his lights. So that's sort of the issue there, is that in her drive rush jab range, you're likely going to get stuffed before you can even do drive rush jab, right? So drive rush is not a great initiator for Viper's offense. What you mainly want to be doing with Viper, in my opinion, is focusing on 3 aspects of your game: the Seismo game, counter poking, and whiff punishment. So Seismo game obviously entails using her seismic hammer, her Seismo. Feinting it more often than you actually let it rock is important, in my opinion. Letting it rock is fine, but it's usually pretty committal, as you'll want to jump cancel it into a burn kick to connect a combo if it hits, or just get some pressure, right? However, Seismo is a move that is reactable with a jump in or another sort of anti-fireball sort of move, right? You can react to the Seismo and counter it. So you really want to play with the feint quite a bit. The feint in this game is a little bit slower. It's quite a bit slower than in Street Fighter 4 actually, which is unfortunate, but it is still a cornerstone of her game plan, right? You want to feint, you want to bait your opponent into overcommitting toward you. That way you can knock them down and start running your own mix. Whether that be with an anti-air, whether that be, stuffing a drive rush if they try and drive rush through your Seismo, or blocking an anti-projectile move, whatever that may be, So whiff punishment is pretty self-explanatory, right? All you want to do is see your opponent's whiffing move, do your own move, connect to the combo. Viper is very good at this because she has some moves that go very far and are jump cancelable at the very least, even if they're not actually cancelable, like in the normal capacity. You can jump cancel them into your Seismo and get a pretty lengthy combo, for some great damage, great corner carry. So her whiff punish game is pretty solid. But what I want to delve a little bit deeper into is going to be counter poking. So counter poking, for those that don't know, entails poking at your opponent when you know or you think they're going to poke at you first, right? You want to counter hit them with your own poke, hence counter poking. Now I have Luke here walking forward and hitting standing heavy punch. So what I want to do is, knowing he's trying to get into that range to poke me with that standing heavy punch, I'm going to use my own poke, counter poke him, and knock him down, get into the corner, start running the mix, right? Now, what's nice about Viper as a counter poke type character is the fact that so many of her moves on counter hit go straight into size move for no extra cost. This is especially nice with moves like standing medium kick or crashing medium punch, as you have plenty of time to cancel into Seismo and get a really nice like 30% damage combo. There are of course other ways to start your offense with the character. You can drive rush, you know, once you've conditioned them to sort of like not check your drive rush in neutral. You can do some pretty crazy things, you know, if you want to commit to like a drive rush overhead from mid screen, you can do that. And you stop them from checking you by doing things like drive rush into Seismo, for example, to punish counter their check, and then convert that way. You can do some cheeky things, but generally the more consistent way to play her, in my opinion, is not really to use drive rush all that often in neutral. You can also do things like jump into light burn kick, right? Super jump into light burn kick is pretty ambiguous, you know? People might twitch react and try and DP you for doing that. But generally, I mean, it's more trouble than it's worth, right? God forbid you miss the burn kick and just go flying, you're punishable on the ground. And even if you get the burn kick off but don't bait anything, they can actually punish you on the ground as well, relatively easily if they do react to the burn kick. So it's not a great option. It is there, you know, especially against characters like Geef. This is really nice for baiting out things like Lariat, you know, and Lariat gives you a ton of time to punish afterwards. So, you know, it can be nice to use in certain matchups, but I would say generally stick to those three core fundamentals of her neutral gameplay. Now, why don't you want to poke with this character is a question I see brought up occasionally. Poking is pretty strong in this game. It's pretty decent. Generally, you want to poke with a cancelable normal, of course, like a low forward into drive rush. But Viper does not have that option. She doesn't have a low forward into drive rush. She only has like a crash medium punch and a crash heavy punch into drive rush, which is not terrible, but it's not nearly as good as a low into it. But her poking is generally okay, but it's not nearly as good as her counter poking, essentially. And that is because moves like, for example, crash medium punch are pretty stubby. As you can see, I'm pretty close to my opponent right now, and it's still not connecting. It does connect from a little bit closer, but it's not a great normal to just throw out there unless you think it's going to counter hit something, because it's, you know, it's fast and it goes into Seismo, as I talked about earlier, on counter hit, which is nice. Now, her standing medium kick is probably her best poke by far. It is really, really nice. Her crash medium kick is also pretty solid. They both go really far, but I would say that they aren't quite as good as other characters' pokes, only because of her own walk speed. I think that is the issue here. It's not necessarily that the normals stop her from being able to be a strong poke character. It's actually just her walk speed that sort of nerfs her there. Not that it's terrible, but it is pretty mediocre, right? So generally, the more consistent way to play her is, you know, not poking at your opponent, not trying to walk them down all the time. You know, walking them down for sure, but also giving them space, trying to get them to make more mistakes against you. Now, one more option I do want to discuss, because it is sort of the elephant in the room here, is grounded burn kick. It is really good. Don't get me wrong. Grounded burn kick is a great move, but it is somewhat risky. Contrary to popular belief, this move is actually kind of slow. It's 27 frame startup, which is 1 frame slower than a drive impact. Now, it's tough to react to drive impact just in neutral, but in the corner, if you're ready for it, you know, you're going to be able to DI back generally if you're just doing raw DI. Most players will, at least most high level players. And heavy burn kick is sort of the same kind of way. You know, if you are ready for this move, it is definitely reactable, right? Definitely reactable. And the follow-up, while very strong, is also sort of a mind game for both players on some level, though it is favored for Viper, right? If you can do this and get in on your opponent that way, go for it. By all means, definitely go for it. It is definitely a very strong option. I just would not recommend this as a core fundamental way to get in on your opponent. Definitely use it. Definitely use it on occasion. because it does go over lows, it goes over some fireballs. It is really solid and a really strong neutral option, but don't create an over-reliance on it, is all I'm saying. Real quick, I do also want to talk about her anti-airs. Of course, you have the heavy Thunder Knuckle, or Thunder Dash, rather, into the Tracer combination follow-up, which gives you really great Oki, really great damage. It's a really amazing anti-air. The only issue with this move is that it's tough to make it crosscut. It's very, very tough. You kind of sacrifice the ability to consistently crosscut for a really consistent anti-air that does not trade very often, if at all. I've actually never seen this move trade. I would like to see it trade at least once, but I have never seen it trade, which is like the opposite of how it was in Street Fighter 4, interestingly enough. But yeah, this is an amazing move, and Stand Heavy Kick is also quite underrated, right? I think Stand Heavy Kick doesn't quite get used enough. It does trade, as you just saw on occasion, and you can get stuffed if you're a little bit too late with it. It is a 10-frame anti-air, so not super fast, but not super slow either, right? But the conversions you get off of this move are really, really nice if you can actually land the anti-air into the jump cancel and you have enough meter to do so, right? So I definitely recommend trying this normal out as an anti-air. If you have the execution, go for some conversions with it. Yeah, it's a really solid anti-air, despite it not being used very often. One more thing I do want to talk about is the Light Thunder Knuckle. Now, this move is a pretty decent little poke, and it goes under fireballs, which is really nice. Now, if you are really spaced out with this move, you can actually get a follow-up off of the punish counter, which is also great. It's kind of difficult to space, but if you can get it, you can get a stand light kick into another heavy Thunder Knuckle, get some Oki, get some damage. It's pretty good. It's a pretty decent little move. It is pretty impossible, in my opinion, to do this on reaction to a fireball. Even if I wasn't on Luke, which I am right now, I have tried this, and I feel it is extremely difficult to actually consistently do on reaction to any sort of fireball, especially at the range that you have to do it at, you know, which is around round start range. But that's why people use it sort of as a poke, you know. Spaced out, it is safe on block, whereas normally it's -4, which is punishable. But if they happen to do a fireball, especially if you're fighting characters like Akuma or Luke or Ken, characters that like to poke with their fireballs, it's a pretty good option, right? It's a pretty damn good option. It's not bad at all. Now, we talked about the 3 core fundamentals of Viper's neutral, right? Counter poke with punish, Seismo game. Now, I want to also break down the next layer of mind game and the next layer of neutral with the character. And that, in my opinion, is actually poking, but a little bit differently from what you might expect, right? The cornerstone of her poking game, in my opinion, is crouching heavy punch into heavy Thunder Knuckle feint. This move is ridiculous. If you can get them to stop stuffing your approach with various things by counter poking them, by whiff punishing them, by using your Seismo game to bait them into various things, once they start respecting you, you can start walking forward and using this move. Right here, as you can see, you are -1, but look at the spacing here. Look at the spacing. So you're -1, but if they try and jab, as I'll show you right now, the jab's going to whiff. If you do another crouching heavy punch immediately after this, you're going to punish counter, right? So that in and of itself is pretty crazy. They already kind of have to use a longer range move, but of course they can just use that longer range move and now, you know, you're kind of in trouble, right? Well, that's where the mind game comes in, because if they now try a crashing medium kick, for example, you can counter hit that because the gap between your -1 on block move and their crouching medium kick is 6 to 7 frames generally, right? So there's a very strong mind game that is pretty much in your favor, in my opinion, with this sort of poking game, and there's like no pushback here. You can also, of course, as you just saw, make the crouching medium kick whiff depending on the character, which is also really nice. But yeah, the poking game is very interesting because you're not getting pushed back, really. You can kind of do this over and over again until they sort of pressure you or give you a reason to stop, right? You can micro walk, keep doing this forever. And as you can see, I'm chunking his drive gauge like crazy right now. It's really, really strong once you get them to respect you. Now, I want to emphasize that because if your opponent is not respecting you, you're not going to be able to get this off very often. Walking forward and just hitting crouch heavy punch is something that's much easier said than done with Viper. You want to be a little bit more cautious than that generally, but once you've finally established yourself and asserted yourself in neutral, it's a really, really strong option to go for. Now I'm going to use this crouching heavy punch into feint as a segue into her pressure game. Her pressure game is pretty similar to this sort of poking game because they're kind of interconnected in some way. You know, you are pressuring your opponent with this poking game right here, using the crouch heavy punch into feint by walking forward and pressing it. But her up-close pressure game is a little bit different, a little bit more complex than that. You're going to want to generally use this button quite a bit, her standing medium punch, right? This is a really solid 8-frame plus on block button. It's not absolutely infallible, right? Because you don't get a frame trap into your mediums, but you do have a pretty far-range standing light kick. So you can frame trap into your crouch jab, and then if it counter hits, you get standing light kick or crouch medium punch from there, right? As you can see right here. You can do that. If it's not a counter hit even, you can do that. So it's a great plus on block mode. Now, you can't throw from this, but that's why you frame trap them, right? You frame trap them first, that way they start to respect your plus frames, and then you can throw them after that. So that's sort of what you do about this +1 scenario. Now, she, of course, does have a +2 scenario as well. A pretty decently common one if you like using the grounded burn kick right into the follow-up. This is a +2 situation, which is nice because you get a frame trap trade combo off of the crouching medium punch. This is really good damage. And with crouching medium punch, you actually generally do want to trade rather than getting a straight up counter hit. Getting a counter hit combo as opposed to a trade counter hit combo will only net you another crouching medium punch into an OD Seismo or just a special move, right? Which is not bad, of course, but you want that crouch heavy punch for that meterless combo into Seismo, right? So I would say crouch medium punch is a solid frame trap. And then, of course, you can frame trap with throw as well. If I can time it correctly. There we go. So that's really nice, too. Now, another move that is +2 is jump OD burn kick. This is jumping in the air and then immediately doing OD burn kick. Not to be confused with super jump burn kick, which is even more plus on block. That's +4. The jump OD burn kick is going to be +2, which is going to put you in the same exact situation as the grounded burn kick in the follow-up, right? Now, being +4 after this OD burn kick is really nice because you actually do get a walk back shimmy here as well, right? So that's pretty cool. And you also get a frame trap into crashing medium kick, which, similar to the +2 on block crashing medium punch from earlier, actually gives you a trade combo into crouching heavy punch. And of course, this will also catch them trying to walk back. And it's only -1 on block, so it's really nice to just throw out there because it does space you out further from their throw range. So you're minus, but you're only -1 and they can't throw you. So if they try and throw you, you can mash jab and counter hit them. Now, before I get into her drive rush buttons, I do also want to talk about forward heavy kick. Forward heavy kick is an interesting move. It moves forward, but it also pushes back just slightly so that you kind of end up in the same position you started in, oddly enough, which is weird, but also kind of interesting. So if they try and jab you after this move, it's going to whiff, right? Which is kind of cool. It lets you do stuff like that. But if they do crouch medium kick, and this is similar to the crouch heavy punch feint scenario, they can actually get counter hit by stand light kick in this scenario. So it's sort of a weird, funky button to deal with from your opponent. I would say give it a shot, try and use it a little bit. It's not infallible, and it's tough to space so that they have to either do jab or a longer normal that you can counter hit with stand light kick. But, you know, it's interesting, and I would say give it a shot. Try and use it a little bit. It's a nice poke button because on counter hit and punish counter, you do get a crouch medium punch on hit. It's not bad. It's pretty cool. Now, one of her go-to buttons off of drive rush is going to be stand medium punch. This is a +5 on block move. As you can see right there, you cannot throw them immediately after this move because you are +5, right? So you need to walk forward a very slight bit before you can throw them. However, you also get straight up frame traps into crash medium kick Crouch medium punch if you so desire, though I don't recommend that. Another stand medium punch if you want, right? So that's really nice. You get a lot of options here. I love doing that personally because if they walk back after the stand medium punch, they also get hit by the low medium kick. So it's nice to frame trap with this button for that reason. Now, standing heavy punch is also a really nice button to use on drive rush because you end up +4 in this scenario, which lets you once again trade with crouch medium kick, as we talked about earlier. And of course, I've been saying this, I'm a broken record at this point, but you want to stop them from walking back, you press that button. If it trades, you get the crouch heavy punch combo. Really, really nice. Now, drive rush crouch medium kick is also a nice button. It only frame traps into her crouching medium punch when dealing with 4-frame normals, but it's still good because it is a low that links into her crouching heavy punch on hit. Only off of drive rush, of course, but really nice to be able to have that. We talked about forward heavy kick earlier. This button is also actually really good off of drive rush. You're +2, which lets you frame trap with a throw, and as we talked about earlier, once again, with this whole thing, you do also get a frame trap crouch medium punch here. Now, the next move I want to talk about is going to be drive rush stand light kick, and this sort of works in a similar way to Guile's drive rush stand light kick, where you can do a button, drive rush into it, and if they throw you, you can actually shimmy them, even though you can also frame trap with a throw here, right? That is a rule that is generally not broken amongst the cast, but it is broken with Viper. You can do a drive rush into a light and then shimmy, you know, with a walk back, which is really, really good. Normally, if you do a button to drive rush into a jab, you cannot walk back shimmy. You'll always get thrown. That was a change in the Season 3 patch, I believe, maybe the Season 2.5 patch. But yeah, Viper has this sort of workaround here with standing light kick. You can also, of course, do crouching medium punch as a frame trap. Once again, off of that +2 scenario, as we talked about earlier. So yeah, really underrated normal. I don't see a lot of players using drive rush stand light kick, but I think it's really good. And the last button I want to talk about off of drive rush is going to be drive rush low light punch. So as you can see there, I set Luke to walk back. I'll set him to walk back after 2 hits now. And what I want to show you guys is that you can actually do drive rush low jab twice and then do 2 crouching light kicks, which is very, very uncommon, right? As is. Being able to connect 2 lows in this scenario is crazy, but then also you can convert off of that low with a jump cancel into a special. And Viper is the only character in the entire cast that can actually do this. There are no other characters in the entire game that can do a light into another light and then hit low and then finish with another low or another button into a special move with no counter hit necessary. Now, this is sort of like a higher level strategy. The execution requirement for this is actually kind of high. It's a little bit tricky to get, you know, especially if you're trying to do things like crouching light kick into super jump cancel OD burn kick like that. Finally got it there. It is pretty difficult to land stuff like that, but it's really nice to just be able to do. And while it doesn't do a ton of damage because you're comboing from 2 crouching light kicks, which are, you know, her lowest damage normals, it's still going to work against a lot of players, in my opinion. Just because there's no other character in the game that can do that, your general instinct after blocking 2 light attacks is going to be to walk back generally, right? So whereas other characters would have to do low forward into some sort of committal move after 2 jabs, right, or a drive rush, Viper can kind of do these 2 light kicks, and if they don't connect, she can just back away, right? She doesn't really have to commit to anything here. So it's pretty interesting. That's the last drive rush move I want to talk about. But yeah, Viper has some pretty solid drive rush moves despite not having a really good drive rush in general, right? Her drive rush is generally going to be used for Oki or for, you know, button its drive rush scenarios. I also want to discuss meter management for a little bit. And meter management is something that is extremely important to Viper's character. If you are in Burnout with this character, you are probably going to die. Probably. She is not a character that works well in Burnout at all. She can't super jump in Burnout. She can't do any of her special moves into follow-ups in Burnout. She's a pretty lackluster character overall in that regard. But she has a lot of options outside of Burnout, so you want to stay outside of Burnout, naturally. You don't want to play sort of like a Noah the Prodigy-esque, playstyle. Now, in order to do this, I highly recommend not using drive rush cancels all that often. Unless you're going to kill, then go for them. But I recommend instead understanding how your opponent is going to get hit and then converting appropriately. And what I mean by that is if you know you're going to counter hit your opponent, you want to combo into a counter hit only route, right? So say you're checking a drive rush, for example, which in my opinion, her best way to check drive rush is going to be her crouching medium punch. If you check this drive rush, you want to do a combo into Seismo. You don't want to do something like this, which I've seen some Viper players do. Now, of course, you can do that, and you're still getting damage, and you're still checking the drive rush. But you're spending way more meter than you otherwise would. Pretty much literally double the meter than you otherwise would doing a drive rush cancel, right? When you can actually just convert for a very low amount of meter into a higher damage combo by linking straight into Seismo. This also sort of applies to, her whiff punishment. If you know a move is going to whiff punish, once again, do a move into a special that's going to link on punish counter instead of just doing a button into drive rush, right? Basically, with Viper, you want to minimize the amount of drive rushes you're doing with the character at all times because you have so many other ways to spend your meter, right? Whether that be on your pressure, whether that be, getting better Oki by using tracer combination follow-ups. You want to, at all times, conserve your meter for things like that as opposed to, a drive rush mix-up or drive rush conversion, right? Especially because off of a button into drive rush, when you do a combo there, you're not building back any gauge while you're doing this combo, right? As you can see, my gauge stays stagnant right there. Whereas if I do something like this, right, I'm actually building back a little bit of gauge. Even though I'm using the same amount of meter, I build back pretty much half a bar of drive gauge there. And a little bit more if I walk forward. Now, speaking of your OD moves, however, I would actually not recommend using OD Seismo very often. This is a move that should be, solely for finishing rounds, right? If you really need the extra damage. However, I would recommend generally going for, if you get standing medium punch and a crouch medium punch, for example, a special move cancel into a tracer combination follow-up, instead of going for a Seismo and a superhero cancel, because you're spending so much meter there, it's not really worth it. And you get pretty, sizable damage off of just doing something like that, something easy and simple and quicker. Now, another facet of her drive gauge management comes in the form of her Seismo game. It's very tempting, especially for us Street Fighter 4 players, to do things like, Seismo into feint, or double Seismo when we don't have the install, right? But as you can see, I'm spending so much drive gauge on that. It's really not worth it. It's really not worth it. You want to just do Seismo and then just leave it, because you're not really going to get punished anyway. It's not really worth it to go for a feint afterward, generally, unless you really think they'll try and jump between the gaps if you do two of them. But yeah, I would say, unless you have the install, don't go crazy with the Seismo game. Just let the Seismo rock or don't. Keep it simple in that regard. But if you have the install, of course, go hog wild, right? Just go crazy. Just do whatever the hell you want. Your opponent's going to feel that pressure if you're in the install. Even though it doesn't last that long, it's really nice to be able to do all of that stuff when you do have it active. Now, speaking of the install, I do want to talk a little bit about it as well. Having the install active gives you so much freedom in this game. It pretty much lets you do what you want to do if you are a Street Fighter 4 Viper player. It lets you do pretty much whatever you want. You can flow pretty freely with the character. Your conversions become far less expensive than they once were. For example, if you were to do something like stand medium kick, or crouching medium kick rather, into OD Seismo, super jump cancel, heavy thunder knuckle, tracer combination, that's taking almost all of your drive gauge. It's like 4.5 bars of drive gauge out of 6. But that same combo, when you have the install, takes only about 1.5 bars, and then you build more drive gauge as you walk forward for Oki afterward. So having the install active opens up so much for the character. You really want to have it active pretty often, I would say. Go into that level 1 as often as possible, or as early as possible, and then just go crazy. Really overwhelm your opponent with the character. Especially if you have the execution to do so. It's really, really nice to be able to do all this stuff. Now, one thing I didn't really talk about in the pressure section, but kind of falls under pressure if you really look at it, is stand heavy punch into super jump behind burn kick. Now, this is really strong in the install, especially because it doesn't cost any drive gauge to do, and it is a really good way to side switch on your opponent and likely hit them, because not a lot of players are going to be looking for this at all. The next thing I'll go over is something that Viper excels at, which is Burnout Pressure. Her Burnout Pressure is some of the best in the game because it does a lot of chip damage, a lot, especially if you're in the install. Now, even outside of the install though, you really don't need to do all the crazy Seismo stuff you might see on Twitter. Now, the grounded burn kick into the kick's follow-up is actually a true block string when your opponent's in burnout. So they cannot DP through this, they can't super through this, they can't do anything. And when you land your +6, which gives you a true block string into crouch medium punch into Thunder Knuckle. So she does a ton of chip damage that's not really interruptible, right? This sequence right here, you can just loop this if they don't really try to check you, right? And the only gap here is going to be the stand jab into the burn kick. Now, if you don't want any sort of gaps here that they can actually do a regular button and hit you out of, you can just do the burn kick into the Thunder Knuckle and then loop this sequence right here. It's pretty insane. This is all a frame trap. This is all a frame trap. They can't do anything out of this besides, you know, try and do a super or, you know, some sort of invincible move through it. And as you can see, I just did like over 20% of his health in chip damage and brought him all the way to the corner. Really, really great Burnout Pressure from this character. Next, I want to show you guys a bunch of Oki scenarios. Now, I won't bore you guys by explaining and breaking down every single one of them. I'll instead just show them to you, and I'll have some text on screen to describe exactly what you're seeing and the benefits of what I'm doing on Oki. So here's a bunch of routes into knockdowns that'll give you some really solid Oki and what to do to get that Oki. That's all I got, guys. I really hope you guys enjoyed this guide. I hope it helps some of you guys out. And I want to know, what are your guys' thoughts on Viper right now? I think she's a very, very fun character. Very unique, very refreshing for Street Fighter 6. She's difficult, but not too difficult. There's sort of a sweet spot there where there's a lot of player expression, you know, allowed in her game plan. But she's not overbearing to the point where it takes like thousands of hours in the lab to actually play her consistently. But yeah, I'm having a blast. So I will continue to play this character for the foreseeable future. And I hope you guys will follow me along on that journey. I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.